I have a problem. Somehow, I can just never find the time to play through half of the games that I actually own. It's not because I don't have the time to play games in general, because I do. I still manage to get hours of game time in each week, but it's somehow never enough to get through my backlog. Almost every gamer has got, or has had, a backlog of games to get through, and sometimes they'll work their way through it slowly until it's cleared up a bit. Lucky bastards. For the majority of people that have a backlog of games though, most of these games will sit on a shelf or in a digital library for years, maybe forever in some cases. I own 4 Zelda games. Have I ever played a single Zelda title? Next question please. Now, of course nobody goes out and buys 15 games all at the same time, only to get home and have a complete breakdown. No, these backlogs will build up over time, at first just being a handful of games that you're looking forward to playing, but slowly, over time, becoming a mountain of games that you bought because they looked good, because it was a great price, or because you thought you were going to get back into Sonic at some point soon. I swear, I'll get round to it. These backlogs are pretty awful. Not only do they add a bunch of stress to what is supposed to be a fun and relaxing experience, but they're also the reason as to why so many of us don't end up playing some genuinely amazing games. So what are the main reasons our backlogs build up? How can we prevent that build-up? And how do we get through our backlog of games? The primary reason for why our backlogs build up is, of course, buying more games than we can get through. But that can be broken down a little bit more. There are just so many great games coming out nowadays. Great games that you don't want to miss out on. AAA titles like Tears of the Kingdom, Starfield, Baldur's Gate 3, just some of the games that have had huge hype this year, hype that you want to be part of. And because of this, we end up buying brand new games before we've gotten through other things on our lists. Or if you're an indie enjoyer, there are constantly so many fantastic games being released that you might have been following the development for quite a while, so when they finally release, it feels so fucking good to buy them, even if you don't play them straight away. We have so many new games to pick from, and when you combine that with how many games already exist that are well worth your time, you suddenly have a ridiculous amount of games that have made their way to the forefront of your mind and are screaming, "Play me, I promise I'm fun." And by the time you've actually gotten through any of them, you've probably found some more games to replace them. What doesn't help this is the fact that every year there will be at least 1 or 2 massive games released. Usually they have a lot of hype behind them, and they'll have these huge worlds to explore, and hundreds of hours of game time. Now, either this will put you off starting a game, because once you've started, there can be this feeling of commitment to actually finishing the game, or it could take up so much of your time that you won't really be able to have been playing anything else from your library. It's great for gamers to have games that offer us so much to do, but maybe it's less great for our backlogs of other games. Virtually every gamer has a comfort game, a game they go back to that's familiar and easy to pick up. This makes sense. We don't always want to have to focus our brains on something brand new and exciting every time we want to play a game. Sometimes it's much easier going back to what we know, and what we're sure is enjoyable. I don't know man, maybe we all missed a secret ending here. The issue this can bring us, however, is that any new game is a new experience for us to take on, and requires at least some brainpower to play for the first time. What are the controls like? What story elements do we need to focus on? Am I going the right way? Am I fully enjoying the game? Sometimes we just don't really feel like getting into that sort of mindset, even if it'll be the best game we've ever played. And so putting it off in favour of something we've put thousands of hours into feels a little bit better. And before you know it, the game is on the backlog, waiting for the moment you're ready to start a new adventure. Some comfort games aren't even very comforting. Most competitive online games like Overwatch, CSGO, Valorant, Dota 2, or my personal time and money sink, League of Legends, are games that you keep coming back to, even if you don't typically enjoy playing them half the time. Addiction is part of it, yeah, but they're also experiences that you're used to, and it's so easy to just open up the game, queue up, and get matched with 4 of the least sane people you've ever been in contact with for a quick game, instead of just trying out that game that's been sitting there for a couple of years. For me, one of the biggest things that stops me from getting through a game and adding it to the backlog is the pressure for the game to be good. When you build up a game in your head, you can sometimes start to build the pressure for it to be the perfect experience, which naturally means you want to play it at the perfect time so that you can experience it to its fullest potential. This happened to me with Firewatch. I waited for the perfect night, got some nice lighting set up, made sure I wouldn't have any interruptions, and I didn't end up enjoying it too much. And honestly, I think the build up and waiting so long to play the game is probably what stopped me from getting into it. So it remained yet another game that would forever be in my backlog. Again, this is something that comfort games, or just any games that you've played before, don't suffer from, because you've played them and won't have the pressure to enjoy them. You can just enjoy them. These things altogether sort of put us in a state of paralysis when looking at our backlogged games. There are often just too many of them, and we don't know where to start. And the pressure and indecision that comes with trying to pick a game to play usually just leads to us going back to things we've already tried and tested. So, what can we do about this? Well, it'll differ from person to person, but one of the key methods for making some actual progress through your games library comes with having some sort of system or a set of rules to almost force yourself to play them. Scheduling a time to play the game might not work for everybody, but if you do manage to have it in your head that you're going to be playing games at a certain time, it's also good to get in your head that you're going to be trying out a specific game on your backlog too. Having it downloaded and ready to play, with the knowledge that you're going to actually be playing it, can often be really useful in getting yourself to actually start the game, instead of making a new save on a game you've already played to death. On top of this, having a mindset that almost forbids you from playing certain games until you've tried out something new can also be pretty helpful here. It takes out the temptation of just going and doing something familiar and safe. You could also set a rule that stops you from buying new games completely until you've played through what you've got. Not only will this help you make sure you're not spending money for nothing, but it's also a pretty great incentive to start some games knowing that you won't be able to get the new release otherwise. These sorts of rules are extremely effective for actually getting you to, at least start, some of your backlogged games. Of course you might try some games and then not really enjoy them, which is completely fine. Don't waste your time on something that you're not going to actually enjoy doing. The important thing is, you did give it a go, and it hasn't just sat there, waiting for you to find out if you do or don't like it, like some nerdier, weird version of Schrodinger's cat. The problem is though, not everybody can make themselves follow these rules, and not everybody actually likes having these rules to begin with, because it takes some of the fun out of gaming. So for these people, maybe the opposite approach will help. Having a spontaneous attitude toward games could often help you decide to randomly pick up a new game. But for that to be in the forefront of your mind, it could be good to have the game on your desk waiting for you there if it's physical, or already downloaded and ready to go if it's digital. But a big one is to try and remove the stress of playing entirely, constantly reminding yourself that there is no pressure to keep on playing if you're not having a good time an hour in. And it's really good to just avoid building up the game in your head before playing it, because it usually just leads to you either being disappointed if it doesn't live up to your expectations, or this unnecessary stress to get every last drop of enjoyment out of each second you play, which ironically will take away from the fun of playing. Biting the bullet and just playing a game will more often than not be way more fun than trying to find this perfect time to play it. Burnout is something that can come pretty easily if you play too much of a game, especially if it's a game that you're not too into, but are just trying to get your money's worth. And you really don't need me to tell you that this is a pretty counteractive way to getting through your backlog. So a good way of avoiding this is to start with some smaller games, using websites like How to Beat, which can give you a rough estimate of the sort of commitment you're getting into when starting a game. When you start getting through some of the smaller ones, it can really help to make your backlog feel much less of a daunting task, and like you're actually making decent progress through it. It's also honestly not a bad thing to just stop playing a game if you're not enjoying it. Maybe you're just not in the right mood and you can come back to it, or maybe it just isn't for you. And that's completely fine. It's way better to just put down a game and feel good about giving it a go, than to force your way through it and end up hating the thought of sitting down to play it. Having two games on the go at once can also help give that bit of variety while playing, which can really help to stop burnout. Maybe with one big daunting game as your main game, and then a few smaller or more casual ones on the side for when you need a break. Other than this though, sometimes it can honestly be okay to just make peace with having a backlog. Sure, there will be games that you don't get around to playing for years, or even ever, but I think sometimes the idea of getting through your backlog can end up causing more hassle and stress than missing out on a few good games for a lot of people. It's a good thing to keep trying to get through your backlog of games, especially if it's a game that you know is going to be great, but you're just putting it off for whatever reason. But part of taking the pressure off of playing these games is also by taking the pressure off needing to get through every single game in your library. The backlog can be brutal, and for a lot of us, we will never truly be finished with it. There will always be new games that we add, and games that we just avoid playing because we're either waiting for a good chance, or because there are other things we want to play through first. There is no shame in having a backlog, most of us do, but it's definitely something that's worth trying to get through, even if it's just a few games. There are a lot of things that can cause a backlog to build up, like having way too many games to play and not enough time to actually get through the ones you have, or the pressure of starting new games, meaning that we just go back to familiar, comfort games. But there are a bunch of different ways to try and overcome that build-up, whether it be through adding a bunch of different rules, which force you to play through certain games, or at least try them out, or if it's a more spontaneous method, which tries to take the pressure off. There is also no problem in just accepting that you have games that you'll never get around to playing. At the end of the day, gaming is about fun, and if playing through familiar comfort games, or new hype releases, other games that have been sitting there for a long time is what you enjoy most, then absolutely just do it. But I do really encourage you to at least try out a few of them. You never know, it could end up becoming your new favourite game.